I'm Steve Bijot, and this is Down Home Corner. You know, I grew up in Canada's East Coast, a place rich with storytelling and storytellers, and I realized everybody has a story, and we are all connected. In this episode, it's a bit of a tribute to a friend and a guy who was a Canadian icon, John Dunsworth. You might know him better as Mr. Lahey from Trailer Park Boys, but he was a lot more, and that's what I want to show you. Now, as I record this, it's been a little over 2 years since John passed away, and as I said, John being a Canadian icon, we would have celebrated the life and the career of him a little more, except the fact that hours later, another Canadian icon passed away, Gord Downie of the Tragically Hip. And Gord, of course, is a great musician, a great Canadian, a great humanitarian. He did so much for the country. His songs did so much for the country. And, of course, we talked a lot about Gord in the days that passed, and there were a lot of tributes that came to Gord Downie. And of course, that was important, and rightly so. I mean, as I said, you know, Gord Downie is a Canadian icon. But in the midst of that, I think John Dunsworth got a little bit forgotten. And I just wanted to kind of give a tribute to John, because I went out and looked out there and there's not much really in tribute to John. And he was such a great actor as well as a great person. And I just wanted to, as I say, pay tribute to John. So as the old saying goes, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? John Dunsworth was a friend of mine, and I'm proud to say that, not because he was famous, but because John Dunsworth was a good person. He always had time for his fans, he was respectful, he was friendly, he was giving. He was fun-loving, yet he was deeply intelligent, and he was probably one of the most curious and learned people I've ever known. He never once turned me down for any request for an interview, or a signed photo, or even a phone call. He was always encouraging, he was helpful, he was nurturing, he was complimentary. He was one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the entertainment industry, and I've met a few. I never met anyone like him. I could go on and on. He was just a great guy. So I wanted to do a couple of podcasts and play some excerpts from some of the interviews I did with John over the years, a span of about 10 years or so. And the first time I interviewed him was back at the beginning of season 6 of Trailer Park Boys back in 2006. And we just hit it off immediately. It was one of the most entertaining and fun interviews of my life. I imagined it was like trying to interview Robin Williams, 90 miles an hour in one direction with no warning, just change directions without losing speed. But he acted a little like a hyper teenager and his silly little playful ways. And I came back at him in the same way. The first rule of improv, always say yes to what the other guy is saying and add to it, in some way if you can. Well, we were like two kids on the air and it was playtime, Well, it was more than that, though. At times he got serious. He'd get deep, philosophical even, And one of the pleasures of interviewing John Dunsworth was the fact that he was a man who thoroughly understood his craft of acting, and he was able to explain it to you and the show itself at times, So what I did was I compiled some of the best parts of some of our conversations in a bit of a tribute to John. He was much more than Jim Lahey, and I want you to get a better sense of who he was as a person, as an entertainer, as a great humanitarian. Now, a disclaimer, if swear words bother you, you want to stop now, because in the next segment, you're going to hear a couple, and then it settles down. But look, I wanted this to be unedited because I wanted the authenticity to come through, So if swear words bother you, stop now. You've been warned, okay? But we open this episode with John doing a character. I won't tell you the name because he tells you at the end. I don't want to spoil it here. But to set it up, it was at the end of our first interview. We had just finished up, and John says, well, did you want to speak to Jim Lahey now? And I said, yeah, let me interview Jim Lahey. So I said, I'm just going to close this file, and you pretend you're answering the phone, and we'll take it from there. And he says, yeah, no problem. So he starts, and I'm frantically trying to close this file, open a new one, and hit record. And then finally I do, and he's in the middle of this explanation of how credit cards work. I don't know why, but anyway, this is how it sounded.
And then, if you don't get it back in time, like you got to make the check out and send her in real quick, because if you don't, because it's taking a week to get the goddamn mail nowadays, and a week to get back, no matter where in the Christly country you come from. And then, if you get her 1 day late, they charge you every single purchase you make that month. They charge you 1.5% surcharge, and it's written right into the contract. It's whatever like 1/12 to 23.5% is what they're charging you. They called me on the phone the other day. The guy called me, said he could amalgamate all my debts for 18%. 18%. I said, well, listen, I'm getting 23% right now. And he said, well, you do 5% better. I said, who do you think you're fooling? Now, this isn't Jimmy. This is his brother, Yodel Lahey. I'm from the South Shore. So I'll put Jimmy on if you really want to speak to him.
All right, I'd like that. Thank you.
But he's pissed.
What, he's angry?
Have you ever had an epiphany?
Once or twice.
When you look into the abyss and you find out that nothing is there except shit apple pie?
Yeah, and the same shitty abyss staring back at you.
Are you going to bloop your own shitties?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to know what other words you can't say. Is there a...
No.
What sounds are you going to make for a word like motherfucker?
Cuckoo.
What sounds are you going to make for, cocksucker? You're good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See, you're on the edge of the shit abyss.
I am.
You are. See, here's the thing. You focus on us as if we're icons and, the best thing since sliced shit cake, right?
No, I just think you remind me of my friends.
Because you're projecting your own brilliance.
Woo.
You are looking at the world as the world will be looking at you. And that's what they mean when they say we are what we make ourselves to be.
Wow.
When they talk about whether it was God who made us or whether it was of the universe, which some people call the Big Bang, right, which is kind of juicy, but it was pretty quick. But look, we're all magical. We're all God, if you like. If we ain't, then there is one God, and why do we have to call them different names and kill each other over it? Why don't we just take the responsibility for being who we are and where we are and try to help out in the world, like you are doing?
Oh, wow. You've really helped me here in this.
No, I don't help you. You see, it's better for you to see not what you're doing, but just do what you're doing because you love to do it. But as soon as you get introspective, you say, why did I tell her I would give her that?
You're not going to tell me it's time to leave because I've snatched a pebble from your hand or anything, right?
I would never do this. You can have the pebble right off.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, at times I would ask John questions about the show, thinking he'd come back in character, and I thought these are just general things, so he's not, going to have any problems with worrying about releasing secrets of the new season or that kind of thing. But he had been through that thing so many different times that I guess he was a little paranoid about it, and he'd always come back with a different answer than the question I asked, so to speak. They were never connected. He just always deflected it, He was so good at it, too. But I think he just misunderstood sometimes that I was just going in a general direction. But, I just would go along with what he was saying, and we just went from there. And sometimes the answers that he would give in the avoidance of the question was much more interesting or funny than he would have given to the legitimate question, Now, though I always had prepared questions, our interviews were pretty organic. I was, again, as the improv rule is, I was willing to go anywhere he wanted to go as long as I could figure out where that was going to be. Now, here I asked him a question about season 6, and here's how he responded.
I'm sworn to secrecy.
You cannot tell me?
Have you ever been dealt with the KGB?
That's a station in San Diego, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Soviet station, KGB.
Yeah, we were rushing to get to the radio.
Now I get you.
Okay. Jim, listen, it's me, Steve. You can tell me. I won't tell anybody.
Okay. You promise not to tell.
I promise.
Okay.
Okay.
Bubbles. Smells like cactus.
Bubbles?
Smells like cactus.
Okay.
Ricky will never be able to do anything other than grow marijuana. He's good at it. I have to admit it. I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, okay.
And they keep me pretty well sedated until I'm shooting.
Now, you really get along with Bubbles quite a bit. I mean, a lot better than the other guys. Is it because he's smarter or honest, or what's the deal?
Bubbles is, your classical idiot savant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ricky is bête noir, and Julian is sexy. Neither of them can step out of the niche that we have painted them in. I've been doing a lot of introspection. The only one that doesn't want to move is Julian. He likes it just the way he is. You know why? Because he is on the top of the pecking order. But he ain't the smartest. I like to think that I was the smartest, but I'm not. You know who's the smartest?
Who?
Barb.
Barb?
She's really smart.
But she divorced you.
That's what I mean. She's smart. No, shit.
You secretly have a crush on Julian, don't you?
Secret schmeekret.
It's not a secret.
Listen. Pheromones.
Pheromones, that would do it.
When two people have pheromones that intermingle and create a kind of cosmic dance in the olfactory spaces, the interstices, then there's nothing you can do intellectually, emotionally or anything. You just are drawn to that person. And for some reason, I have this connection with Julian. And I'm calling a spade here. Thing is that sometimes you're with someone that you really, in your heart of hearts, you just don't like, and you spend years and years and years. And it's because they covered up their pheromones with Chanel No. 4.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
Or underarm or something. Rectal odor covers up pheromones.
It will.
And I have a new product. Go to my website.
I knew this was coming.
Never mind. I don't know how I'm going to pull myself out of this direct questioning because, every bone in my body wants to respond. But I swear, I got 2 of my fingers broken last year because I revealed a secret about season 5. Yeah. I just tell you that Barb and I will be able to lick this thing together.
Well, I guess it's a good thing it's on cable TV if that's going to happen.
Now, I said I wanted to show that John and John's career was more than just Trailer Park Boys. In this next segment, John gives us a bit of his bio and how he first worked with Mike Clattenburg, the director and creator of Trailer Park Boys, and how the character Jim Lahey was first introduced and how they developed it. And also later on, you're going to hear about how John felt about fame.
I've been acting for 40 years or so. And so that's why originally you asked me about, about the other experience of the other actors. And I've done a whole bunch of stuff. And I've even toured a bit. We went to Washington in the 80s with Mermaid Puppet Theater, and I toured with Neptune Theater, which is a professional Halifax theater around Nova Scotia mostly. And, I did a little directing and even in Newfoundland. But I never thought, I wanted to travel Canada. So I got an agent in Toronto, a film agent, a number of years ago, hoping that I would get different postings. Never got dick. I did get a wonderful series called The Pit Pony, Andrew Cochran did in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, that went for about 3 or 4 seasons.
That's how you met Clattenburg, isn't it?
No, I met him before that because he went to India and did a film called India Kicked My Ass, I think. He went by himself with his handy-dandy Sony camera. And he made a world-shaking documentary. And then that's how I first heard of him, I think. But he was traveling around Halifax doing this silly little production called One Last Shot. And it was really, in a way, his homage to independent theater. But it was so successful, having been edited within a half an hour of the deadline of the Atlantic Film Festival about 10 years ago, and then screened and won Best Director or Best Picture or something like that. And from that, working with Ricky and Julian, and I was in that one too, he went on to do some more. And the next one was the Trailer Park movie, and then after that, episode 1 of Trailer Park, the series. But I met him on that first film, and I played a drunk pet store owner, and his name was Mr. Lahey.
And because of that, guys, it was originally a smaller role, and it actually grew because of your work on that. What didn't it?
You can't give me the pebble back. Give me the pebble back. There is no small roles.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. I had a wonderful role. That first film, I had rats crawling all over me while I was inebriated in the cage at the pet store. It was wonderful. That never made it to the film, but they shot a lot, but a lot of it hit the cutting room floor, which happens all the time. Sometimes you're just too good for the medium. You'd blow, the muses wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah. And now the muse.
Hey, can you name any muses?
I saw the movie The Muse with Albert Brooks. Does that count?
How did you spell that?
M-U-S-E.
Wow. And who was that? His muse?
His muse originally was Sharon Stone, I think.
She's a nice muse.
Yeah, I've mused a lot thinking about her.
Back to Bubbles and his musing cats, I would say that if Bubbles were to make, some kind of business venture seriously and not connect himself with those other two shit apples, that he would be in serious contention for being able to pay his taxes. Which he'd like to do. Because I talked to him once, and I told him that if he doesn't declare income anywhere through his life, he won't get any Canadian pension.
Wow.
Well, there's something that you don't get when you turn 65 if you didn't work. What is that? When you contribute in, like every couple of years or every year, you get a statement from income tax saying, if you retired right now, you would earn $1.67 a month or something like that. But
and it's tempting to quit at that point, too.
For Bubbles, it might be.
Now, you can be a little hard on Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles. And I mean, you are. Let's be honest. You're a little bit hard on them at times. But I realize you're doing your job, and I realize it's not because you're a mean drunk, but because you really care about Sunnyvale. But how do you account for the fact that most people in the park and at home really love these guys?
You know what? Compare me to George Bush. Kind of misdirected, but really trying to do my job, right? Now, he was inebriated, so he's pretty pickled. So he's got wrong thinking, just like I do. But the people he goes after, like Julian, Bubbles, and Ricky, have lots of people that love them. And when he hurts any one of them, there's dozens of people that feel sad because they're their loved ones. So even though you might say George is doing a good job,
I wouldn't say that, no. Not me personally, no, I wouldn't say that.
Well, you might say that the Christians of the world are saving the world from evil.
Well, I'm going to have to hang up soon. Okay, good point. Good point.
You're lovely. What's a guy like you doing in Canada, man? You could make it in the States.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that, but I'd have to take out part of my brain to make that really happen, wouldn't I?
No, but you'd have to get your teeth fixed and lose 20 pounds.
Yeehaw!
Are you bald yourself?
No, not myself. No, in fact, I have way too much hair, they tell me.
Oh, you do? Does it grow down your back?
Well, it's kind of curly, so it's a little puffier kind of thing, and I'm kind of looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy these days.
How much do you weigh?
I weigh 140 pounds.
No.
I do.
How tall?
5'7".
Well, that's a good weight.
Well,
you're in shape.
Yeah?
That's good. I'm trying to I gave up cigarettes 3 weeks ago.
I'm trying to do that. How did you give up cigarettes?
Well, I did a little ritual thing. I bought some patches for the first time. Now, to put things into perspective, remember, I've given up cigarettes 50 times. I've lasted from a week to 3 years. Well, 2 years. Well, a year and a half. You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
I tried it many times, and I could quit it cold turkey, but 3 weeks in, I'd see someone with a cigarette and say, hey, I got this kicked, I'll have one, thanks. And then the next, 20 minutes later, I'm buying my first pack. Or the next day, or whatever. But this time I bought $28 worth of patches, wore them for 3 days, decided that maybe I was really becoming addicted to nicotine through the patches, because I don't think I ever really was addicted to nicotine, because I could give it up so easily.
Well, you did it hundreds of times, right?
I did, and I would go for months. And then I would just I'd sit down to play a game of bridge, and one of the guys would be smoking, and I would just reach over, knowing full well what I was doing, and say, I want a cigarette. Do it, because I'm weak. I'm weak.
This would never happen with drinking, though, would it?
See, the problem here is I have recognized the futility of subscribing to any kind of devotion to an ideal that cannot be accomplished. So I have giving up alcohol.
You got to say it, Jim. For me, you got to say it. I am
the liquor. Propane. Gotta stop the pain.
In this next piece, I asked John a question about the show, and he avoided it by paying me a huge compliment instead, which kind of threw me off, but I got to tell you, I cherish that to this day. At the time, I deflected the compliment, and I only half jokingly, asked him if he can find me a part on the show. And he goes into this great rant. It's hilarious. But then after that, since, as I said, John was notorious for jumping from subject to subject at 90 miles an hour, I just thought I'd string a couple of highlights and clips together for you. And you're also going to hear how deep and intelligent a guy he was. What a great guy he was. And he'll tell you, as I said, about how he feels about fame.
Do you know what I think is really incredible? That there's probably lots of guys out there that are just as smart and right on as you. And that this is Canada, and we got a collection of them, and we've got ways to make them shine. I don't think you should go to the States. I don't think you could shine like you're shining now.
Do you think you could find a part for me on Trailer Park Boys, maybe?
You have asked a $1 million question, and it's because we got a nickel every time it was asked. Hey. We're up to $1 million goddamn dollars. I'd be perfect. I have a cousin. That looks just like... Look, I'm telling you. This guy does. You should hear him. He's incredible. He sounds just like Bubbles. My mother went to school with Ricky's mother's sister in Toronto, 1960. I'm going to make a phone call.
That's a lot of math, Jim. That's a lot of math.
It is. It is so much math. Call me Juan.
Juan, can I call you again?
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Juno.
Juno who?
Juno, or I could get a drinky poo. Hey, I don't have a flamboyant fecal fetish. I have a basic underlying appreciation of a good evacuation.
Methinks thou protest too much.
No. When you defecate, you're really performing, a beautiful spiritual act. It's been number 2 on the list of man's greatest accomplishments since the dawn of time. Ever since Adam first said to Eve, "Stand back, honey, I don't know how big this thing's going to get." I wonder what kind of accent he had when he spoke.
Good point.
Do you think the humans came equipped with language? When you drive through Toronto and you look, and you see all these little stores, thousands of them, all the different boroughs, all the different Cabbagetown, Chinatown, all these beautiful places, Queen East, Queen West, every single one of these myriad million, there's 1 million of them. 1 million businesses in Toronto. If not 1 million, at least 500,000. That's 500,000 millionaires, because every single shop you see. And you go into some of the shops, like one that I was in the other day, the guy had $1.5 million worth of shit in there that he owned outright. He was 66 years old, pulling on cigarettes, smoking his lungs out, and I said, why don't you sell this and retire and have a good time? He says, that's what my wife says. And I said, well, why don't you do it? He says, I told her they're going to carry me out of here. I'm not dying at home in bed. Well, gee, if she's that unattractive, maybe you should. My point is, there's so many rich people in this country, and not just rich, those 500,000 Toronto millionaires, but even when you go out west and you try to buy a piece of land beside the ocean and stuff, it's amazing what opportunities in this country. I don't know. Like you asked me earlier if I were, you know, how I felt about fame and fortune, and I said all I really wanted to do was to be allowed to do stuff and to act. That's how I feel. That I just love to be. My dad, he was a psychiatrist, Frank Dunsworth. He said, when you're dead, you're dead. But you're not quite so dead if you contribute something.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and if we're contributing a little bit to Canadian culture, baby, all the better, because I don't care. I'm having such a wonderful time.
Well, I think that's a good way for us to end it, because I think you are contributing a lot to Canadian culture. And like I say, this is quickly becoming one of the biggest Canadian productions ever. And I wish you all the best, because I think it's an amazing show.
Well, I think things sound pretty exciting in Campbellton if you're the voice.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your good taste.
I look forward to meeting you in the flesh and buying you a double, buddy.
You know, very often in interviews or documentaries or these type of things, you hear the announcer come on and he says, well, sadly, we never got a chance to do that. That's not how this one ends. You see, not too long after that first interview, we did meet in the flesh, and I didn't take him up on the double because I don't drink. And he doesn't drink very much either. In fact, that's the question people often who knew that I knew him would ask me, and they'd say, well, did he really drink a lot? And I'd say, no, he doesn't drink hardly at all. In fact, very rarely. And I'd say he's just, you know, a good actor, and he just plays that role very, very well, and that's why you think he's a drunk in real life, you know. And they'd say, "Oh, well, that's kind of good." Yeah. And I don't know, I think they got kind of a bit of respect for John, but that was the first question people always ask me: does he drink a lot, really? Anyway, after about the third interview, John says, "Hey, when you coming to Nova Scotia, buddy?" He says, "We'll take you out for a boat cruise with me and the family and stuff. We'll have some fun." Well, you know, at that point, I'm going to go through hell or high water to get to Nova Scotia. So I figured out a way. I asked John to get me the name and the number of the extras casting director for the show. So I called her. I booked a day of work as a background actor on the show, which meant I was going to get paid and fed to work on my favorite TV show. Yep. I was going to Nova Scotia for sure. So I booked a train to Halifax. I got my cousin and her husband, Peggy and Glenn Buchanan, to pick me up at the train station and put me up for a couple of days. Now, the next day, Peggy and Glenn drive me to the marina, and there's John waiting to greet me. And he says, "Hey, I was expecting to see this real straight-laced looking guy, and here you are, the coolest guy in New Brunswick." And I thought, well, this is definitely off to a pretty good start. So we go off on a cruise in the Atlantic Ocean with John, his wife Liz, and his two daughters, Sarah and Molly. Now, Sarah Dunsworth, you remember from the show, and John reminded me that a young Molly is actually in the intro each week. She's with the other children that are portrayed in the intro, you know, when they're dancing around a jungle gym or something outside, you know. One of those girls is Molly. So anyway, we go on this cruise. We're on the Atlantic Ocean. It's a wonderful, beautiful Saturday afternoon, and we're on John's yacht, the Emerald Princess. And I got to steer for a while. That was pretty cool. And we even went into Peggy's Cove. Now, what's nice about that is now I've had a chance to see Peggy's Cove from two different standpoints, you know, two different points of view, you know, from the shore, far away from the wet rocks, and the other way, just coming into the marina. It's just really, really cool, you know. Anyway, that was one of the happiest days of my life. You know, it's a memory I will cherish forever. And it's all because of John Dunsworth. Well, his generosity didn't end there. I told him on the boat that my call the next day was at 6 a.m. He says, well, I can't offer you a ride in because mine's after 12 o'clock. I said, well, no, it's okay. I said, I'm just curious, you know, it's at the Halifax airport. And if you're checking it out, it's season 7, episode 1 and 2. And I said, look, do you think, just so I can save my cousin to drive me in at 3 a.m., do you think that I can show up at, say, 10 p.m. the night before and just hang out on set until my call the next morning at 6? And he says, it'll probably be a closed set. And he said, there'll be security guards on site. So he says, I don't think you can do that. But he said, here, hang on a second. And what he did next, it blew my mind. Okay, he goes into his wallet and he pulls out a business card with his name on it. And he writes his phone number on the back. He says, give this to the security guard and get him to take you to my dressing room trailer. You can use that till your call at 6 a.m. You can crash out there if you want. That's the kind of guy he was, okay? That's the kind of guy he was. Now, if you do some research into this, find out how many extras or background actors in the industry get their own trailer. I'm going to guess the answer. I'm going to guess the answer is coming up pretty close to 0, Anyway, I felt like I'd won the lottery, Can you imagine if you're a fan of Trailer Park Boys and, you go to one of these celebrity auctions, where they for charity and they bid off, spend a day on set with so-and-so. Can you imagine what a fan would have paid for that day that I had? Well, anyway, this was all a gift, okay? For me, this was a gift to me, And not only that, I was getting paid to boot. Wow. So I used to call John on Canada Day every year. It was like a tradition, I started doing this. And after about the 3rd year, he says, why do you call me July 1st every year? And I said, John, you're the most Canadian that I know. And you're a great down-homer, too. So I just feel like calling you on Canada Day. Well, it was things like that about John that I miss, and there's only one time I can remember with John that he was at a loss for words, and it came after I complimented him. And I remember it was right when we came back after shooting that episode of Trailer Park Boys. And I was standing in the driveway at my cousin Peggy's and we were saying goodbye, and he was standing kind of with the car door open, and he's standing between the door and himself saying goodbye. And I said, John, thank you very much for the day. This was great, a great experience. Thanks for the lift home and everything else. And he says, no problem. And I said, John, I got to say this, I said, John, you appear to me to be a pretty successful guy. You got a lot to be proud of, and I said, I'm proud of you as a friend, and I said, but you know what your true success is? I said, it's your family. And he looked away, okay? He couldn't look me in the eye for a second. And then finally he looks back and his eyes are all glazed over. And in the softest, most completely vulnerable voice I've ever heard from him, he said, thank you, Steve. That means a lot to me. Well, everybody who knew John Dunsworth has a memory of him, whether you were a fan, a friend, or family. And that moment that I just described, that's my memory of John. Because that moment, I think, defines who John Dunsworth was. Family, friends, and fans. He was gracious, and he was giving with all of us. And sometimes he blurred those lines of family, friends, and fans. John Dunsworth was a friend of mine. And I'm proud to say that. Not because he was famous, but because he was good. That's our show. Thanks for listening. Our little tribute to John Dunsworth. And we've got another one coming up. We've got some great stories we're going to tell as well. But I just wanted to do this one first and let him tell you in his own words his story. A little bit of it anyway. Thanks for listening. Down Home Corner is produced by Mike Sacchetta and me, Steve Bijou. Visit our website, downhomecorner.com. Listen to all our past shows and our latest ones as well. I'm Steve Bijou, a Down Homer, reminding you everybody has a story, and we are all connected.